cautionary text circumvents the conversation about circumcision. They don't want people squirming in their seat too much. But the practice of mandatory circumcision was a marker of not being free to choose in the ancient Jewish culture. In other words, someone pushing you towards being required to circumcise your child was pushing adherence to a very strict law. Freedom. Freedom is a spiritual rite of passage. Freedom is a spiritual rite of passage. And the Amish take this idea of spiritual rite of passage quite seriously. An Amish person cannot join the church until they're 16 years old. And they're given an extensive education about the community, the culture, the faith practices that their community is built upon. And then they're given choice. They're given freedom. Do you know the name of that right that they're given that is describing of their experience of freedom? It's Rumspringa. Rumspringa. Running around, it means Rumspringa. Running around, to be offered the freedom, somewhere between 14 and 16, to explore the world outside. Get outside of the tight-knit community. Get outside of whatever confines you feel. Live it up. And then you must choose. And then you must choose. You must choose where you belong. Amish country, Amish community, or the larger community that you've been exposed to. Where you belong. This choice is as informed as it is consequential. They have all the training. They get their foundation. They get to experience what's out there. But then an informed, consequential choice is made, and there is no turning back. The freedom to leave the Amish faith after Rumspringa is a fork in the road. You choose this or you choose this. It can't be reversed. The people who use their freedom to pursue the world and what is out there outside of the Amish community are shunned. I've seen a movie or two about this. Have you? It's intense. The practice it's a great movie theme. It makes for high drama, and in general, the strict adherence that's being asked of and required is always portrayed as really harsh. It said that shunning means that the person will forever be considered an outsider, a stranger, and will not be allowed to participate in the community ever again. All family ties ceased to exist. Terrible, extreme, harsh. Can that be what freedom is meant to be? Is it supposed to look like that? Paul writes that our faith as Jesus' people is anchored in freedom, but it's consequential freedom. In the gospel reading, Jesus is walking towards Jerusalem, right? That's kind of like the euphemism for he's going to get killed soon, and he knows it. He's walking towards Jerusalem. Literally, he's walking towards Jerusalem. Figuratively, these are intense times that Jesus and his disciples are in. On the way, a city of Samaritans reject him and his followers. And you know what? Jesus doesn't even let that bother him. He dismisses their rejection, settles down the disciples, and they keep moving. And onlookers watching this experience of Jesus moving toward Jerusalem, they are simply moved. by the power, by the fierceness of Jesus' faith, his conviction, the love churning at the core of it all. And a few people even approach him. Imagine being that daring and say, I want to follow you. I want to go to Jerusalem with you. And without missing a beat, without wasting a breath, Jesus goes all Brenda on them. Sure, you can come. Sure, you can come. But it's a tough road, and there is no going back. There's no going back. We don't really believe that. We have a lot of languages for going back, right? Oh, we backslide. Or we take a break from community or church or prayer. We have a lot of soft ways of saying, you can turn back for a while and still come on in. We don't like to demand very much of ourselves and each other when it comes to this call to discipleship that the Amish and Jesus are very clear about. We're free, but it's a consequential freedom. Like the Jesus people, our faith is called to be anchored in the experience of freedom. We might not have to choose between Jesus and our families, but some of us have. We're called to make choices, hard choices, consequential choices. And if we are making choices about our faith, then what are we doing? If our faith isn't part of what's informing our freedom, then what is our faith in our lives? Can you imagine being an Amish person between the ages of 14 and 16 and being compelled by the world outside their community? And it's not all about partying and TV and learning to roll your own cigarettes. That's not all they do in their time away from their fairly cloistered Amish community. They see the news, they see the papers, they meet people who care about things that they're passionate about. So can you imagine being one of those people that has spent this time of discernment away from the Amish culture, and maybe there's a social issue that they just feel on fire about. Maybe they fall in love in the world, in a certain part of the world. Maybe they fall in love with the planet and want to be part of the health of the planet. Maybe they find a career that is just right for them. Maybe they just fall in love. And they have this freedom to make a consequential choice, but they can't go back. Can you imagine? It's a game changer. I imagine the process must be excruciating. Sleepless nights, endless conversations with their peers, the people they've met newly in their lives, the pros and the cons, the gains and the losses. What is critical to me? What values underpin the choices I'm going to make? Game changer. Today, how do you identify the critical choice points that you're up against, that you're in the middle of? We are a church we had a baby shower here this week, yesterday. We have a wedding here in a couple weeks. We have people entering hospice. We are at every point in this journey as a church family. And at every point, there are choices to make, that we have the freedom to make, that we're called to make. There is some choice in you living now. And what would it look like if we really identified those choices and kind of excavated what's in and around them and held them in this place of love and faith? I made a critical choice about family leave recently, and it wasn't an easy choice. You know, I like to think I can do it all. I kind of think of myself a little, you know, on the lines of Superwoman. It might be one of my delusions, you know. But I took family leave, and it went against my Puritan work ethics. And although I was supported by the leadership team here in the community of faith, it wasn't an easy choice to make. But ultimately, what it came down to for me was love. You know, loving myself, loving my family, and loving this community enough to know certain things need to be handled so I can be fully present here. There are times we must choose, really choose. We are given that freedom. It is our spiritual right. It is consequential freedom. But Paul writes with caution. He writes, "You are called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love, become slaves to one another." Freedom in this context, and the freedom we're called to, is a powerful force for good in the hands of love. Powerful force for good in the hands of love. We're not going to be called to make the same choices. We, however, are all called to make choices rooted in love. If your conviction is rooted in love, you can stand up for it, you can be proud of it, and you can feel peace about it. If your choice is rooted in self-indulgence, however, there's something completely different going on in you, isn't there? Few words as you start experiencing strife, or maybe jealousy. Maybe you start getting a little angry, or you start getting in quarrels with people. You start making factions, building alliances. Those are the kinds of things when we're choosing and using our freedom and not rooting it in love. Churches are people, right? Anybody here not human? Because I am, totally. And it's really interesting how some people think that they have extra judgment when people in churches get in conflict with one another, right? It's like, well, you're supposed to be Christian. You're supposed to be loving. You're supposed to be people of the Spirit. And what I think is that is our call. And that is our covenant with one another that we keep coming back to as we live in community, make choices in community. We come back to making decisions, having conversations, seeking guidance, rooted in love. So whether it's in our community of faith, whether it's in our families, or whether it's in our own hearts, we're making those stands and taking making those decisions, taking those stands rooted in love, you're going to feel a sense of rightness. You just will. It's not easy, but you will feel a sense of rightness. Freedom to choose is a spiritual rite of passage. It is only generative, though, if it's rooted in love. And it is destructive if it is not rooted in love. Love, St. Augustine or Augustine, depending what church you were raised in. He said this, love God and do what you want. How cool is that? That's what it comes down to. Love God, freedom, and do what you want. Because if you're in love with God and making your choices from love, you can't go wrong. So I guess I could kind of just throw the rest of this sermon out, sure, and end with that. Love God. Love. And do whatever you want. Amen. Amen. Maybe so.